You know what gets me is that these clinicians, providers, doctors at the end, um, they don't really know what's going on. They just know it works and it makes money. That's all they do understand. So when you talk to a clinician and they can't tell you the mechanism of what's really going on and what's the difference between totipotent, pluripotent, unipotent, all these terminologies, and you have to start asking, well, if you don't know that, how do you know exactly the mechanism?
Is that a fair way to think about it?
Absolutely. Our body has the ability to be perfect. It's just that we don't get the right. You've got to get the right signal. Sometimes these signals are kind of inhibited. There's something going on with the process of our information to tell its particular organ or tissue to do its job. If you get it into the right environment, the body will do and take care of itself. It has that thing called innate. It has the ability, and just that homeostasis.
Imagine a future where doctors don't just treat disease. They repair damaged organs, regenerate damaged tissue, and potentially even slow the aging process. It might sound like science fiction, but scientists working in regenerative medicine believe parts of that future may already be beginning. For decades, medicine has focused on managing illness, but a new field called regenerative medicine is exploring something very different, helping the body rebuild and repair itself. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Tommy Rhee, a physician working in regenerative medicine. Dr. Rhee, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I've been waiting for it. But before we dive into today's conversation, I'd love to start with a bit of context, if that's okay. Who are you? What have you been dedicating your life to over the past decade? And how has that journey shaped the perspective you bring to this conversation today?
Yeah. So I'm what they call like a sports chiropractor, and I was fortunate enough to be part of UCLA, uh, their uh, their athletic department, and that allowed me to see these high caliber collegiate athletes in all sports from football, soccer, basketball, water polo, tennis. It allowed me to see a lot of sports, and then with that, it gave me an opportunity to see their typical injuries and what they do in order for the recovery component of it and how to rehab back out of it. So as these kids graduate from college and they go into like Olympics or the professional world, you tag along with them and you see that caliber of that therapy, that kind of recovery and, training. And during this process, when you get to that elite type of athlete and you're going into that high professional realm, you're starting to see that world of like regenerative medicine, things that help you speed up recovery, either from an injury or workout. They want to get back to, ground zero at 100%. So you get introduced to these like stem cell therapies and all these devices that helps them get back to its original state from a workout or injury. So when these guys go into like the professional world and they move around, I'm tagging along, and then I end up in Tampa, Florida, and there I'm with like Olympians. Then I become part of this WWE, like the World Wrestling Entertainment Group. And then I'm now team doctor with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that NFL team here in Tampa. So once you start going in this world, you start toning into what they want. They want to recover fast. They want to become that person. So I'm in that perfect area where I see everything from their training session to how they recover and then the advanced equipments they use and then the stem cell therapy. Because of that, I introduce it in my office, so I present that to my patients. So I get to see everything as far as the mechanism, the thought process, and how this is moving forward into the future. And you start really understanding like what is going on. What is a cell? What's a cell? Just to kind of like this live cell, the thing called a mesenchymal stem cells, and there's this wording called like it's a pluripotent, and it differentiates into your target tissue, and these are nice buzzwords, but then when you look behind the mechanism, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't really define what's really going on. So that's why I started investigating and trying to figure out what is the process of this whole stem cell therapy, regenerative medicine is all about. Because of that, you move into the world of like research, and then you get so much research, you decide, hey, I understand this. Let me write a book to explain this all to you. So I wrote a book about it. But the whole thing is not about the stem cells turning into your existing tissue. It's about the cells, the stem cells, they secrete information, signals, and those signals tell your existing tissue to do something because our body runs on signals. We always want to receive something that says, all right, do something. Either like pancreas, secrete insulin, something. We need some kind of signal, and that's what this is all about. We have to give the right signal at the right time to tell our bodies to heal, regenerate. So now you look at the whole world of like invasive injections, and then you think about what's an easier process of like delivering this type of like what they call the signaling molecules into your body. Well, then, I started looking to topical. So it's just an evolution of these athletes, where they're going through, how they train, and how they really look at recovery. And then from there, when you get into recovery, you look at the different avenues. And then, the common thread in all this is that it's always injectables. It's always, and the injections are kind of difficult because it has its risk factors, it's got downtime. And, I really think that when you look at an injection, you have a primary injury. And then when you put the needle in there, now you have a secondary injury. Now you're saying to yourself, hey, now I got to recover from two sites. So that's why topical is moving into the future where it's delivered easier and non aggressive. I hope that explained everything right there.
It did. It did. And for someone who's hearing about regenerative medicine for the first time, I know you spoke a bit about stem cells, but what is regenerative? What does that mean?
Well, think about what our body does. When we grow up, we're immature, we grow, we have our little growth plates, we have our height, weight, we start expanding out. Once you get past puberty, we're basically just status quo. We're just like stationary. So then what we're doing is that we have to take the old tissue out and replace with new tissue, a 1-to-1 ratio. You want to have the recyclable type of ratio. Now, as you get older, or you may get traumatized or injured, the signal that we're trying to regenerate that particular cell to replace the old cell, well, it starts slowing down because the signal is not there to tell the existing tissue to do its job. So now the ratio becomes two cells destroyed, one cell replaced. And then that ratio gets bigger and bigger as we get older. So regenerative medicine is trying to get that signal back to its par to get that 1-to-1 ratio. So it's almost like, you're doing the house cleaning, and you decide just to keep on bringing trash in the house and not throwing it away. And that's what you need to do. You got to be able to bring food in and then throw the trash out. Just have that 1-to-1 cycle. So regenerative medicine is basically keeping that signal so you get that 1-to-1 ratio.
So, if I had to look at traditional medicine, I mean, it probably focuses more on managing the disease, and I would somehow think regenerative medicine seems to focus more on helping the body repair itself. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Absolutely. Our body has the ability to be perfect. It's just that we don't get the right signals. You've got to get the right signal. Sometimes these signals are kind of inhibited, blocked. There's something going on with the process of our information to tell its particular organ or tissue to do its job. If you get it into a right environment, the body will do and take care of itself. It has that thing called innate intelligence. It has the ability. And just that homeostasis, that nice balance. Sometimes we get obstructed, or some information is depleted, or like anything else, you get some type of misinformation. Well, you got to get the right signal. You got to get the right information into your body, and then the body can do its job. Sometimes medicine is more mechanical. They try to force things. It's like they want to like either like kind of like, if you have something that's maybe hormonally going too excessive, they take the first layer, not the source or the root cause, and they'll just block that hormone. But then it takes the cascade of that blocking of that particular hormone may work its way down to some other process that you're inhibiting. So you have to have the body just get back in balance to do its own job. It's a well-oiled machine, and if you can get that machine working correctly, but that's what you need. You just need to get that proper type of homeostasis and that ability to have your own intelligence in your body to do its healing.
So regenerative medicine is more trying to solve the imbalance in modern medicine. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, imbalance, or more so just getting a signal. You just want to get
Okay.
that insufficient. For instance, like you age and these signals start declining. When they decline, you're starting to now have the cells are kind of going like senescence or a zombie state. Well, it's just sitting dormant. It doesn't do anything. You've got to get that cell back to its original functioning state, and you have to send a signal. And that signal, because of senescence, then you have to think about an enzyme to increase that ability for those things in the end of the chromosomes called telomeres to grow back. And that enzyme is called telomerase. That's a signal. It's just an enzyme. All these are signals. You get that signal in there, it grows those telomeres back to normal length. Now it's out of zombie state or senescence. Now the cell's ready to do its job. If it's going to be like cell division, make other cells, it's going to do its job. But in order for you to start that process, you need to wake it up and give the right signal to do its ability.
Dr. Rhee, you said as you get older, your body starts to decline. So I'm assuming that regenerative, there's an opposite, which would probably be degenerative, if I'm correct. What's the difference?
Well, I mean, you think about what you're trying to do. You're just trying to get a cell healthy. You're just trying to get the cells function correctly. And the weird thing about cells is that it doesn't wear out. It doesn't do like it's like you just keep cycling through and it just burns out. You just have to get the right information, the good healthy and good nutrients, and then have that cell do its job. So take away those components, take away that nutrients, take away maybe oxygen, take away those things. Well, you're basically denaturing it. Now you're having a poorly operating cell. Now you're doing the opposite, right? Now you're taking a cell that should be functioning and you're shutting it down. Well, you do that over a period of time with other cells. That one turns into 20, 1 million. And then now you have something that's getting like a ischemic, poor blood flow. It's dying away. So that's the opposite. You want to go ahead and turn it around and open up the channels, get the right communication, get the right signals, get the right flow, and make it function correctly. So that be caused by environmental stress. Stress is the worst thing for us because you think about what stress does to our body. Stress, vasoconstricts our vessels because it shunts the blood from our arms and legs to the core. So that poor circulation is going to be detrimental to our tissues at those distal ends of our arms and legs. So we have to regain that circulation. So there's a lot of factors when it comes to like slowing things down or inhibiting the regenerative properties in our body. So that's a tough thing. So it's just not just so much the body, it's the mind. Also include the spirit, put it all together, and it's a good mixture of all.
You said spirits. I'm assuming there's a bit of mind games going on when one is injured as well.
Yeah, think about what you do. If you're a physically fit person, and your Zen moment is going for a run, and you get injured and you can't run, what happens to you? You can't get that Zen. So mentally, you start going into that world of like, I don't feel complete. I feel insufficient. Now the mental game plays in there. So, is it the chicken or the egg? Now, guess what happens? Now the depression sets in, then here comes stress. Stress comes the autonomic nervous system from sympathetic. It's a worse kind of like the sloping scale of deteriorating to what you don't want to be. So you got to make sure that you're positively understanding that there's three components. If one goes down, just keep the other two going. Keep your spirits up, you know, make sure you're mentally strong and understand the whole principle of recovering from injury, surgery, something. Just remember that there's going to be an end to it, and then you'll gain that access into that Zen point.
You used the word a few sentences back, and you said depleting the cells. And, I see there's a lot of hype around fasting. People are fasting for 12 hours and 18 hours, particularly those who have cancer cells, if that's correct. But if fasting that long of a duration, is that not depleting your cells?
Well, we have storage sites. So you look at time frame at 18 hours, 16 hours. It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing, well, I mean, what you're doing during that time. So if you're just doing status quo, no exertion, no like high energy performance, you're gonna be fine. But if you start pushing yourself in that fasting, and then you're doing some type of cardiovascular or even like something that's going to tax you a lot in a long period of time, you got to be careful because it's going to take energy from something. If you waste it down too fast, it's going to get energy from your muscle cells, and that's what they call gluconeogenesis. It's going to get sugar from something, right? It's going to get glucose from
Mm.
either from your fat, from a slow, easy day burn, or if you're doing some type of activity, well, it's going to go for the easiest source, and that's your muscle tissue. It's going to pull that amino acid out of there and goes, all right, I'm going to waste away the energy that's quickly accessible for me to keep myself going. So that's why you got to be careful what you're doing during that time. So if you're doing a fasting and you're just, being status quo in the sense that you're just doing normal daily operation, just walking, working at your desk, I don't think it's gonna be bad. But if you do an activity that's gonna push you into that realm of like cardiovascular hour push, well, now you're doing counterproductive stuff to your body. You're almost doing what you're saying, the opposite, regenerating. You're like degenerating.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you touched a bit on stem cells, and I mean, stem cells are often described as the future of medicine. And I know you went into it a little bit, but what conditions can stem cells realistically help treat today?
Okay, there's a lot of research on this world of stem cell. I mean, not only in the sports world of like the typical like ligament, tendon, connective tissues, muscle and all that stuff. Now there's a lot of research in existence in the possibilities of organs, like just like the pancreas, kidneys. Now think about it. Our cells have the ability to do its job, and they call it mitosis when you start cell dividing. It's like the RNA, DNA replication. It goes to this like cell division, makes these things called daughter cells, and it starts dividing. Well, as we get older, these things slow down. We have these adult stem cells in our body that does particular jobs for particular tissues. Well, as we age, these things, because of its replication, has a limit. You get so many of these things that turn into itself over and over. And then at a certain point, these little ends of the chromosomes called telomeres, those things are the protected caps. You want to keep these codes aligned. You don't want to have, like, for instance, if you look at a chromosome, it's just four letters, right? It's these letters that basically represent this kind of coding into what the tissue should turn into. Well, it's a million codes. The thing is that if you don't have that end cap and you like remove it, these things will still replicate, but now these letters are mismatching. Now that you want to turn into like a tendon or a liver cell, well, because these codes are mismatching, because there's no protective cap to kind of like secure it, it's going to turn into whatever it wants to do because there's no control mechanism. So that's why these telomeres kind of stop. And when they stop the replication, it turns a cell into like a zombie senescence. When it's just sitting there doing nothing, well, guess what? That's part of aging. Now, we have the ability when we're younger to make those enzyme telomerize to make that telomeres grow back and start doing its replication. But again, as we age, those telomerized start slowing down, and then we don't have the ability. That's a signal. That's a signal that we need to introduce our body to go back in there and give these chance for those little cells that gone to the zombie to do its job. So that's that process when you look at regenerative medicine in that side of cellular regeneration.
Dr. Rhee, we often hear about elite athletes using regenerative therapies for recovery. Why are professional athletes so interested in these treatments?
Oh, it's a cutting edge. Think about here's a perfect example. Think about an umbilical cord or placenta, a tissue like that, right? Even an embryo turns into a baby. How fast does that grow? That's what you want. You want that signal, that bright, strong signal to get into your body. So if you have a damaged tissue, it tells, all right, quickly heal. An athlete wants to get back at high performance as soon as possible from an injury, from a workout, from anything. Because that's what workout's all about. Workout is like a micro trauma to a body part. So then you recover and it gets back bigger, stronger, and faster. So athletes want to be in that perfect 100%. And when you're in that perfect 100%, then you can achieve at maximum, one max rep, your best performance. You have every firing cell going. Whereas if you're like overtraining, you're doing something that's pushing yourself beyond the actual recovery zone. Now what you're doing is you're working against yourself. You're not 100%, you're 80%. And then it starts dropping down. Now here comes repetitive injury. Maybe something even worse is, You don't get that max rep that you used to get, that performance you used to get. Here comes a mental component of it. Now you're get the physical, and here comes a mental. You're blaming, not yourself, but you're blaming like, oh, my training coach sucks, or this is terrible, my nutrition. And you look at because I think the simple fact is that you're not recovering correctly. So that's why regenerative medicine is important. It gets them back quicker so they can keep on pushing themselves to get that better technique or practice session.
Doc, is there actual science behind this, or are some of these claims just exaggerated?
Oh, no, there's a lot of science behind this. But the science is interesting about this. There's a lot of science behind this whole principle as a mesenchymal stem cell and then your target tissue. And the target tissue does start its process of doing its cell division and growing back its particular tissues. But here's a problem with all this research. It doesn't explain exactly the mechanism where this live stem cell called mesenchymal stem cells turn into your existing tissue. It's kind of like a vague conversation. Goes, it just differentiates, and then that's it. There's no explanation on there. It talks about the signaling molecule. It talks about this, but here's a real question. If you remember, like in biology, and you think about chromosomes are what we talked about the telomeres, right? Those chromosomes are exactly what's in our body, and then we have a particular code. Well, my code is not going to match to your code or anybody else's code. So, how does that donor site match exactly like my tissue code? It's impossible. So, then you take the next step. It's a signal. The signal is what you're looking for. These stem cells secrete these things called, extracellular vesicles, and that has the information. And the neat thing about that, it's cell-free, meaning there's no nucleus, there's no DNA. You just want the information. It's a smaller molecule, more manageable, and now it's safer. So when you think about stem cell and you think about this world, people think that these cells mutate into your tissue. It doesn't. It signals. And that's why it's important to understand that your body has the ability. You just want that strong signal into your body to say, okay, do your job. And that's what you want. You want that kind of information, not so much the information with the other stuff, which is the DNA and all that stuff that may possibly do something that you don't want to get involved with, which is like tumor formation. You don't know what that cell will replicate into. It might be coded for something else instead of your target tissue of a tendonitis thing. So that's the importance of that.
Um, you mentioned two words, and you said topical, and you said invasive. What does that mean?
So presently, all therapy with the stem cells therapy is via the injection. So you get this kind of like mesenchymal stem cells, and you inject it through the skin with a needle. The tough thing with this stuff, it's invasive. Anytime you penetrate your skin with a needle, your risk factors go up a lot because of the fact that there could be like a little bacteria or virus on the needle. And then now you're looking at possible infection. In addition, when you have a primary injury site, let's say it's a patella tendonitis, right? Your knee, that tendon there. And then you want to go ahead and inject in the area because you have to deliver that mesenchymal stem cells and the signals to that area. Well, now when you penetrate that tendon, you just created a secondary injury site. So you have a primary and secondary. With needles, you have to have downtime. You can't do anything after a stem cell therapy. You're just shut down. And then when you go with topical, you can avoid all that. You can avoid that risk factors of infections and bacteria. And you can also avoid that whole downtime because it's not invasive. You're not actually taking a needle through the skin, through that tendon to deliver that. Because of the smaller molecule and then the cream that you're placing on your knee and then it penetrates through a transdermal agent will pull through that thick layer on top and then it'll get to the deep tissue. And that's what's fantastic. The future is going to go into the mode of non-invasive, topical versus the needles, which is the invasive and more traumatizing and risk factors.
But with the invasive, you go straight to the point. So if I had a wrist injury and ideally a needle goes in there, so like you said, it's a primary and then a secondary. But with the topical, I merely just apply it onto the joint or the area of injury. Yeah. And
Yeah.
but the absorption rate would be a lot slower, right? Compared
Yeah.
to invasive.
Yeah, exactly. So with a product like Regen and the injections are the same type of quantity of information signal that you want. The difference is an injection, it just takes one injection and is all delivered at one shot. With the topical, it's a 30-day straight application. You got to do 30 days straight. Because of that 30 days, there's a saturation level. And then the neat thing about that, as it goes through your skin, it's it's almost like a funnel. You put it through your skin and it funnels down. Your target tissue, the one that's injured, it sends out signals. It sends out signals that I'm injured. These signals, these signal molecules will hone into that information that it's sending out to kind of match up. It's almost like an insulin and glucose. It will match up because those receptors are meant for each other. So that's what it's just like the injection, except for the injection is more like, aggressively, invasively, but it delivers it all in one shot. Whereas a topical, it's a 30-day application, day after day, and then that will deliver as much information as the injectables.
Can something like that, I don't know, I'm thinking of osteoporosis, I'm thinking of arthritis. It's a topical cream, and generally we find the older folk suffer from this sort of disease. Would something like this work?
Yeah.
The topical cream? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you think about osteoporosis, osteopenia, that's when you have that bone density decreasing, right? So that's more of systemic. I mean, that's not localized. So when you think about something that's systemic for your whole body is going through this bone density loss, you want to do two things. You want to think about another delivery system, like a systemic delivery system. I know mine is localized, topical is localized, but it does get to the bloodstream, but it's a small fraction compared to the
Okay.
localized, spot. So you'll get some of that, signaling throughout your body. But when you want to look at something systemically, you need to get something that's like something that can basically go into like the cardiovascular system where it can transmit faster through your whole body, or something maybe through your circulation in your cardiovascular, something else. But there's going to be a nasal spray that it can be delivered that way, IV. But again, that's invasive. But nasal, I think nasal because right away it goes into your lungs and it collects there, and from there it starts spreading out quickly. So, but when you look at other tissues that you're talking about, like osteoarthritis, localized, and like a chronic injury like tendinopathies, tendonitis, or just basically like jumper's knee, well, those are repetitive injuries. When you have repetitive injuries, it's because you don't have the recovery time. It's because you're getting older, but you're constantly pounding on that particular body part. You don't give it time to rest. If you really want to recover real good, like you want to recover, and you're at that age where I'm at in the 50s, well, you're going to have to immobilize. So if I had like a knee pain that's not healing correctly, it's because I walk all the time. I'm always applying pressure on my knee, that tendon. I'm always irritating the tendon. If I really want to heal it properly, I would immobilize it, meaning that I put it in a cast or brace, and I would be no load bearing on that knee, and I would sit there for whatever time, 3, 4, 5 weeks. But nobody wants to do that. They want to constantly move. So if you don't have that ability to have that fast recovery, well, guess what? You have to immobilize. Now, if you don't want that either, then you have to find something that speeds up that recovery, and that is regenerative medicine. That speeds up that recovery. When you speed up the recovery, now you get those tissues back to normal, and now go on to your normal like workouts.
It's a bit of a trade off, though, isn't it? Because you immobilize, and then I find a lot of the guys around go complaining, oh, I've lost fitness. It's so hard to get back. I run slower now, or I lift lighter. So, yeah.
That's that's why you have to find a secret. And that secret is regenerative medicine. Just get yourself understanding that tissue breaks down. No matter what, it does break down. When you work out, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to break tissue down so that it gets bigger, stronger, faster, so then you can do a better PR, a better performance the next time you do that event. But you have to recover. And as we age, our recovery slows down. Instead of taking 2 days to recover from a workout, now it's 4 days, 5 days. But I want to work out every other day. Well, you have to speed it up. That speeding up is that process to make that tendon get back to its original healthy side by adding in there that message from the stem cells.
So, there's another, it's not a product, but another biohack, if you want to call it that. It's a small chain of amino acids that apparently access signals in the body. It's telling the body to repair tissue, release hormones. It even reduces inflammation, apparently. And it's becoming very popular in longevity. and biohacking communities. From a scientific perspective, how real is the promise around peptides?
You know, there's a lot of good science behind it. Here's remember what your body's trying to do. It's trying to receive information. We release and then we wait for signals. So if that peptide's chain of amino acids is correct in its signal molecules, it would do the target tissue and then it'll wake it up. That's what you're trying to do. Our body is always dormant in some way because we just basically kind of sit around and we age and our cells go into senescence or some type of zombie state. But you have to get that ability to have the right information and get it activated. And our body slows down that process. Those amino chains, those little peptides, well, like anything else, they get depleted. They lose their signaling ability. So you're just introducing it back into the body. So there's a lot of good science behind that. The interesting thing is that we all know that, there's a product out there called a VPC 157, right?
Hmm.
So that's the one that you think about. It's the lining. It's basically the kind of like that lining in the small intestines, right? And that cycles a lot. It has a lot of like trauma to it because it has a lot of motility of all that food that goes through there. So it has to recycle quick, and that's where those peptides are at in abundance. Well, if you get that same signaling information and then you inject an area, well, it's supposed to do its job. Now, as far as like what is it going to do in long term, that's the question that people don't understand right now. So it's going to take time. So that's why I feel that right now stem cell therapy, it's the wild wild west. I mean, it's not really regulated here in the United States. It's kind of like only regulated on the lab side where they do the extraction off of the umbilical cord or the placenta to get that mesenchymal stem cells. Beyond that, it's not really regulated. So a lot of these clinics kind of make these statements like 10 million cells, and then we can get you back to normal. We can restore hair growth. You got to have a little bit of science behind it when it comes to some of these statements they say. Because live cells, believe it or not, but by the time you get the cell, right, so it's cryopreserved at the lab. Then when you order it as a clinician in the lab, right? So I order, let's say I want a cc of or a milliliter of mesenchymal stem cells. They'll ship it to you in a cryopreserve. When you get it, a lot of these clinics, what they do is they take that little vial and they put it in their hand and then they defrost it with their own body temperature. And then, that's what they recommend and that's what they're taught. Well, if you know anything about that cryopreserve and you want to have it into the living state, there is a process that you have to defrost it. It takes a long process to take it from negative 166 to room temperature. It's a stepping of every 10 degrees, cooling it down into the temperature you want it. When you do a quick defrost like that, it's called shock thaw. When you go through that process, you're killing the cells. That's too fast. So then when you kill the cell and you're injecting it, well, you don't really have the live cells. But the funny thing is that it still works. Then you go down the pathway. Goes, well, if it's not the cells and the live, cells, what is the next thing? It's the signals that excrete outside of that cell that gives you the information that do the regeneration, the signal your existing tissue do its job. So that's what the fun thing is that you're starting to see this whole new trend of cell-free bioactive biomolecule, cell-free kind of biomolecules. That's what this is all about. You're going to hear those words like peptides. You're hearing exosomes. You're going to hear these new words that coming out here, and that's where the trend is. That's what my book I wrote, a couple years ago about that cell-free. It's all about the non-nucleus, just the information, the signals that come from these cells that we want. That's what we want to turn on.
Dr. Rhee, we spoke about peptides and you mentioned BPC, I think it is 157.
Uh,
And I think there's something else called the TB500, which they combine together, or apparently. I mean, which peptides currently has the strongest evidence behind it?
I'm not really strong when it comes to the peptide therapy. I'm
Yeah,
not really, I just know that's
yeah.
very famous. It's the new buzzword, just like stem cell was a buzzword. Everything's a buzzword now. But the one thing I know about that world is peptides in those two products are synthetic. When you look at that, you're kind of like playing around with the molecules and you just got to be careful. When you look at stem cells are from source from human tissue, and they do their job. They have the right perfect signals for target tissue. Now, if you can understand that One is synthetic, one's naturally already produced. You can see the difference right there by itself. So for long-term use of these peptides, you don't know because again, it's kind of derived from a lab, right? Where the other one is
Yeah.
derived from human tissue. So is there any type of like research? A lot of research being conducted right now. And patients are enjoying themselves with that type of therapy. I just know that right now, if you understand about signaling and where it's moving towards to, now people understand that it's about that information. Well, here's a better thing that's going to happen, especially that I'm involved with. I'm moving the signaling. I'm moving into plants because plants have the same signaling ability as these human tissue sourcing. So now this is going to be a plant based product that has the same ability to signal your existing tissue to do its job. And that's what I'm excited about. So now the transition is from that world of human tissue sourcing to plant. With that, I can go onto the old OTC, FDA OTC over the counter. I can sell directly to patients. And instead of that cost, because injections cost between $5,000 to $15,000, and then the product itself, because the processing, well, the product retails for $1,000. Well, now with the plant based, I'm going to be less than $100, and it does the same signaling as these other type of stem cell human tissue. So that's what I'm excited about, and that's where we're moving into. Just the signal. Just think about the signaling, and that's what we need to get in our bodies.
I was reading a paper once, and I think it made reference to whey protein versus pea protein, which is a vegan protein. And obviously, pea protein being suitable for vegans and derived from plant, if you want to call it that. Would it have the same sort of potency as, your plant versus your human derivative?
Well, based on the research that I pulled up, as far as like one-to-one potencies, it depends on the quantity, of course, right? But if you take the same information and the same type of functionality, yes, it does the same. Now, if you have a lot more human tissue source of these like signals versus a little fraction, it's not going to be equivalent. But if you do that possible function of doing the same job, it does. So as far as like understanding about what your body's craving for is the signal, it has the same type of potency as the human tissue, but it depends on the quantity, of course.
Mm. We're seeing a growing biohacking movement where people are experimenting with peptides and stem cells and longevity drugs. Uh, do you think some people are pushing these therapies too far? I mean, without understanding the actual risk, and like you said, one synthetic and the others natural. Uh, at this point, just taking anything.
Yeah, what gets me is that these clinicians, providers, doctors at the end, um, they don't really know what's going on. They just know it works and it makes money. That's all they do understand. So when you talk to a clinician and they can't tell you the mechanism of what's really going on and what's the difference between totipotent, pluripotent, unipotent, all these terminologies, and you have to start asking, well, if you don't know that, how do you know exactly the mechanism? I mean, these are generic terminology that you hear in the stem cell world. And why is it banned to do harvesting of cells versus actually like, taking a tissue, harvesting is basically taking your own tissue, put it into a petri dish, put these mesenchymal stem cells, grow it, and then re-inject into your body. Why is that illegal in the United States? Why they ban that stuff? So you have to kind of do your homework and figure out what's going on here. Why are these people are the leading edge, like experts in this world, but they can't define what the mechanism of stem cell is. So you have to start the process first, getting educated as quick as possible, and understand what's the signal. What are we trying to do here?
Mm, mm. And is that what concerns you most about regenerative medicine? Is
Yeah,
like how it's marketed to the public? Yeah.
it's really two big things. So my first concern right now is the FDA doesn't regulate beyond the lab. When you go beyond the lab, the FDA doesn't really regulate like clinics, doctors, and how they do the procedure and how they're really marketing and advertising. Now, the interesting thing is that you're starting to hear the FDA, pretty much shutting down these labs that are like improperly doing their extracting of the tissue. So they've caught some labs not even using human tissue. They use like either like some type of animal tissue. So you're hearing that side of it. And then you hear some actually not using that umbilical cord called Wharton's jelly or the placenta. They're using like vaginal tissue, other tissue, because the end user, they're not analyzing it. They're just saying, okay, I trust the lab. Let me defrost it. Let me put it in the syringe. Let me put some saline in there. Let me mix it up and inject the area. So they don't know. So that's why the danger right now is to figure out how to really know what you're getting. And that's the difficulty. Who can tell, right? You have to do analysis of your own, the sample. You may waste that. So there's a thing that you can do. You call your clinician. I want to do stem cell therapy, and then you talk them. Hey, I need some traceability, and they'll give you a piece of paper to have like a documentation or the history of that particular donor. Maybe some serology, some blood work, pathology, STD panel, and they say, here you go. Now it looks fine and dandy. It looks scientific and looks like it's from the donor, but how do you know that that is the actual tissue and the form that matches together? So there's your first one. You don't know. So you got that problem. Then you got these other places that are basically they don't know what they're doing. You're telling people that I'm getting stem cell therapy. They'll do 10,000 live cells and then they'll say things like, "Oh, I got sick the next day." Well, your body just took on all this sort of like this foreign antigen, and your body is saying, "Okay, let's attack it. Let's go take our immune system and fight this thing." And that's why they feel sick. So that's why you got to be careful when you take this live cell into your body. So that's why I'm concerned about this whole world. And until they regulate it, it's going to be more problems down the line. That's why I feel that the trend should be understanding the signaling, the mechanism, and learning about the plant's same ability of signaling, and then utilizing that source, which is much easier on your body.
I can understand why you refer to it as the Wild West. Uh, the clinics charging huge amounts of money for treatments that do not have enough scientific backing. I'm not sure if that criticism is fair, but yeah, it is the Wild West because it's a lot of gray areas, I guess, if you want to call it
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, especially when clinicians don't know what's going on. If you ask a normal clinician that offers stem cell therapy, just ask them, how does this work? And they'll tell you just a generic term. These stem cells will differentiate into your cell. And you ask them the next layer of questions. How does that happen? It just knows. That's what they say. It hones. They don't go into it, which is exactly what the answer is. Nobody really knows if it does that. Then you have to think about, well, biology, chromosomes, it doesn't match up. Well, it's got to be the signal. The signal makes sense because our body runs on signals. Hormones, we secrete hormones through our body to target our insulin, right, in the pancreas and say secrete. And then those two match up from some type of receptor. And then all of a sudden it pulls that little glucose out of the bloodstream, puts it into a liver, fat, all that stuff. So it's about signals.
Hmm. One of the most devastating areas of medicine is neurodegenerative diseases. And I mean, do you think regenerative medicine could eventually help repair or treat conditions like, I don't know, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's?
Well, here's the thing about Alzheimer's and dementia. It's not so much the. It's not so much the. So think about it's not really about the cells degenerating. It's more so the plaquing there. So when you look at that world, it's like this kind of coat of this. They call it amyloid beta or tau protein, right? It's basically sitting on top of these neurotransmitters in your brain, and it's kind of like blocking. It's almost like putting a dam in between these, connecting the axon, and dendrites. They kind of like connect. Well, it's like a blockage in there. So then you have to think like, why are these things forming? Why are these proteins or this kind of plaquing is forming? Then you have to think like, all right, what does our body do? How does it recycle in the brain? Well, we have to think about the next thing, which is called the CSF, right? Cerebral spinal fluid. It's that washing machine. It's that river in our body, right? It's all throughout our brain. We have to have that flow. So when you start thinking about these people that don't do a good job of exercising, or maybe they have a poor function of nitric oxide that vasodilate small vessels, sometimes that fluid, because of inactivity, it just goes stagnant. When it goes stagnant, There's not that channel to waste away that heavy plaque tau, that tau protein or that, amyloid plaquing. You got to get that stuff out. And that's why exercise is important. Get that fluid moving in your brain. Just get it out. So I think that when it comes to that kind of world, when you look at regenerative medicine, it's going to do its job down the line with these these. Anyways, it's called Schmoll's. I mean, sorry, it's yeah, Schmoll's nerves, not Schmoll's. It's Schwann cells. Schwann cells are like the adult stem cells in this type of neurons. But when you look at the dementia patients, you're looking at plaquing. You got to get that circulation through the body to waste that stuff away. And then with that, it's more so exercise. You've got to start exercising, get that fluid to move. The fluid has to move to waste away or remove that waste out of the brain area. So I look at it that way.
Mm. Some scientists believe aging itself may eventually become something we can slow down or even partially reverse. I mean, from your perspective, do you think regenerative medicine could slow the aging process?
Yeah, I really do. If you just look at the simple principle of cells and what happens when the cell slows down and then how it has to be replaced, if you can keep that 1-to-1 ratio going, that's a secret. You can get that age pushing 100, 200 years. It's all about having that cell, just keeping that 1-to-1 ratio. One destroys, one builds. One destroys, one builds. The building is what the secret is. We always will destroy the cell. You've got to replace it. And that's the secret. And it has to come all the way down to telomeres. Telomeres are the ones that are going to really be the secret for this anti-aging longevity. Because the whole cells, everything we have in our body have those things at the end of our chromosomes. We need to keep that restored. That's the secret right there.
Do you think the first person to live to 150 years old has already been born?
I, you know, I think the way we're discovering, yeah. Now, don't forget, we are starting to speed up all this intelligence and discovery because of AI. I mean, that's a fast recovery. And wait till we get this quantum computing done. When they start getting this quantum computing, oh, you're going fast. You're going to have a great discovery. It's going to be very fast. You're talking about what we went through the last 15 years. We're going to go. I mean, we're going to quadruple that in a matter of seems like maybe like 1 year. It's just a matter of just getting the right information at a fast pace and then interpreting. You have to take all this data and you got to find a way to interpret it. And when you got something like a quantum computer that can take something and solve in less than seconds, where it took like NASA computers years to solve, whoa, you're talking about 150 years old? Yeah. It's just a matter of understanding how to deliver the right signal at the right time.
Yeah, and we're seeing a massive investment in longevity science, isn't it? I mean, you've got individuals like Brian Johnson. I mean, he's trying to reverse aspects of his biological age. Probably, I don't know, maybe he'll live up to 120 years or beyond. I'm not sure if that's realistic, but yeah.
How old is that guy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually don't know. I must actually find out how old is he,
Yeah, he's
and,
probably
and
a
that's what
young
I'm
guy.
thinking. Yeah,
I
yeah.
always think that I always think that anybody in longevity and they're a leading expert and they're younger than 40, it's hard to understand them. If you have someone that's talking like close to my age, 58, 61, now you're talking about somebody that's still active. I mean, I don't. Maybe I look like not 58. I look like 57, but I still look younger by a year. But you want to look for those experts, and those are the guys you really want to hear because they're the walking labs. They know that if they're doing something, they're going to do it on themselves. So it's like one of those things that you just have to like you have to see the source. You have to make sure that this person is the exact same person that they're trying to explain the anti-age. Are they in the 50s? Are they really reversing? Are they really commanding what they want to do? If they're in their 30s, it's hard to take advice from someone like that.
Yeah, uh, Compliments to you. You don't look like you in your 50s, by the way. I meant to say that earlier. So,
Hey man,
uh,
it's all about the lighting. It's all about the haircut,
the camera.
the camera. It's, hey, Hollywood. I have so many tricks going on. I could be one of those Chat GPT fake videos right now, right? AI things.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Many regenerative treatments are extremely expensive, Doc. I mean, do you worry that we could create a future where only wealthy people can extend their health and lifespan while others can't?
Oh, that's 100% true, right? It's happening right
Yeah.
now. So that's why what I'm developing is going to be that type of like relief for those people that understand that regenerative medicine is what they want, but they can't afford. Well, the plant based is going to do the same thing, but now it's affordable. Instead of thousands of dollars, now it's going to cost you less than $100 to do it. And that's what I'm excited about, getting to everybody's hand. And then think about it. Right now, our technology of information is so available to everybody. Just with a phone, their computer, they can figure things out. They know if they have a tendonitis, right, in their elbow. They say, "All right, what is that? What is that all about?" Oh, it's basically you got your tendon of your wrist extensors being irritated, and you're getting like a micro trauma. And they say immobilize it, wear a wrist base, wear something to prevent it from moving. But nobody wants to stop moving, so you have to speed it up. Well, guess what? Get Regen. Now it's delivered to your house, less than $100, and then now you can get involved with regenerative medicine, just like the stem cell of $15,000.
Wow, that's impressive. We're talking a lot about the healing injuries and what regenerative medicine does, but could we eventually move beyond the healing and maybe start enhancing human performance beyond what's natural?
Yeah, I mean, you can see that it's if you look at like just testing of the NFL, like these combines and these sporting events, you can see performance going up. So it's happening right now. But then again, you have to remember when you get to the elite athletes, you get to a point where you have the performance, you have everything you need. Now it's about recovery. You've got to get back into your normal state because when you start pushing yourself at one max rep or any type of explosive or just hard workout or trauma or injury, it's about getting back to normal. And that's the secret. It's not so much the workout. I think anybody knows how to beat themselves up and get sore, but you have to get back to square one. That's the hardest. That's the secret. If you can get back quick, fast, now you're ready for the next event. You're ready for the next workout. And that's what I'm excited about.
Early on, you mentioned growing organs, and it's like one of the most mind blowing possibilities in regenerative medicine. I mean, do you think we could reach a point where doctors could actually grow organs in labs instead of just relying on a donor transplant?
I don't think about growing, but regenerating what you have. Yeah. I don't think, I think there's going to be a point, of course, way in the future that you can actually have some. I can see maybe 100 years from now, you're going to take your tissue and then you're going to go to a lab and you can grow your own heart, your own liver. You can grow tissue that it's on a standby just in case you somehow need it or something. There's that. But right now, it's about taking your existing tissue and just having it just be because our body has a perfect balance. We know exactly what to do. It's an amazing piece of machine. So once it goes off kilter, a little bit of pH off or a little bit of too much sodium, it knows how to balance it. Once it loses the ability to balance, it does a lot of counterbalancing. It does, all right, we have too much sodium. We're going to have to retain something. We have to do this. We're going to do that. It does its job. You just have to get back to balance. And then once you get that balance, you're okay. Well, you need to get the signals that tells everybody to do its job. So that's why I feel that regenerative medicine with organs is going to be more so of just maintaining and just getting it back to normal function. Whereas if you want to do like a growth and grow another tissue outside of your body, yeah, that's going to happen. It's probably happening right now. The problem is there's an ethical side of it because once you start going into that, what's going to stop somebody to start doing like the brain and the nerves, and next thing you know, here comes the whole body. Now you're looking at this person. Is he a person or is he just a right donor tissue?
Mm,
So it's going to be a very ethical question when it comes down the line.
mm. What is something that's happening right now in regenerative medicine that the public would find hard to believe?
I think the false illusion that this will solve a lot of diseases. A lot of people do a blanket statement like stem cells will do all these things. Like for instance, like you remember like CBD and all this marijuana extract CBD, and you would hear things like it can do all these things. It can solve depression. It can do this. It can do that. Right? It just throws a blanket over everything. Well, stem cells, same thing, because we can do everything. We can solve, pancreatitis. We can solve this. We can do that. Oh yeah, you got this. You got to be careful. I think it's one of those things that people are wishing that they can solve without the invasive world. So that's it. I'll do that. I don't care. So I guess that's the biggest thing that I'm afraid of out there.
Mm. Have you ever seen a patient experience something in regenerative medicine that made you step back and actually think for a little bit, wow, this is the future of medicine?
So I guess the biggest success I had was not so much on the the physical side, but it was on the mental side. So I had a guy that was a avid skier. Every year, ski, ski, ski. Now, he came to me because he had bilateral left and right knee. He had osteoarthritis, and he was a candidate for knee replacement. And with that, he couldn't go skiing. He was pretty much set into the surgical world, but he wanted just to talk to me about this. So after talking, and then we did some X-rays, and we saw the actual joint space loss. He didn't have any like that bone cortex destroyed yet. He still had everything in line, so he had a little bit of cartilage left. So he was able to use that tissue and grow it. So I said, all right, you're a candidate for this, but you do have a little bit of destruction here. So it's gonna be some process, but we'll get back into it. So it took about 2 injections. This is back before I did the topical stuff. So but the interesting thing about him was that, I knew it worked, but the physical, yeah, I understood. We did a post X-ray; it was fantastic. But the mental side was what it was amazing. I mean, you think about a miracle of life altering change in his body. Him not skiing for years, and now he's able to ski again. So I think that impact was very profound to me when you see someone that really goes into the world of depression. I don't want to do surgery. I'm basically selling into this world of okay, I'm never going to be like that person again. And now you give them a chance. When you give them a chance, they're like, "Whoa, I can see it. I'm back." And it was very emotional for him. It was pretty fantastic, and that surprised me. I was like, "Wow, I never seen it in that capacity before." But now, understanding that there is a possibility for this guy, you can just imagine what's going on there when that people really do need this stuff. And then that's what I'm excited about is getting it to them.
So, if we look at a knee replacement, 6-week recovery post surgery, probably the implant will last you 15 years or so before it needs to be revised. Something like this, like what you've done 2 injections. How long does that last?
Once you get that cellular signaling down there, it's going to last for depending on how severe he is going to beat his knee down. So don't forget, there's that portion of he's recovering, and now he's got that tissue getting back to normal, but then he starts using it again. So it's one of those things that you just have to stay on top of it. I mean, I wish it was one of those things. Once you start the signaling process, it goes forever. But you gotta understand that if you're gonna put yourself in harm's way and beat that knee down, well, you're gonna have to recover, and that recovery, consists of that signaling in that topical region.
Yeah, and then it's mindset, isn't it? Because you're feeling better, you can move, you're more mobile, and you somehow feel you can go back to your old ways of skiing as hard as you want to ski or run as fast as you were running previously.
Yeah, that's
And of
important.
course, yeah.
Yeah, that's important because most of the time everything is based on not so much pain but just being a person of like worth. I always feel that these people don't feel their worth when they're injured and they're not active, and they go into that, well, I'm not that person anymore, and they accept that their physical or their outgoing personality that's associated with being physical is gone, so they slip into that little world of like mental depression. Once you give them a hope that hey, you can get back into this thing, and you give them into any type of activity that they're close to having before, oh, it turns them around real fast. They're like, wow, I'm excited. I see a brighter future in front of me. I see the light.
Are there regenerative treatments being offered today that you personally would never recommend to a patient?
Going overseas, going to like Mexico or Central America, I wouldn't do that. Now, since I mean we're regulated in the lab side of it, so we have at least some type of government agency that kind of oversees things as far as like they check on labs, make sure that the tissue is what it is. When you're overseas like in Mexico, you don't know what you're getting. You it could be a fetal tissue. You don't know what you're getting. And when you get a fetal tissue, you're talking about, there's an ethical side of it because there's from abortions. Then you're looking at the other thing is that, well, what's this going to turn into? I mean, it's cells that's supposed to turn into something. What if you shoot that into your body and it's like a cardiac tissue as you're shooting into your tendon? You don't know what you're getting. And
Mhm.
that's why people go in there, and then it's a several day therapy. They do the injection, they do a lot of other things like cryotherapy, red light therapy, hyperbaric chamber. They do all these things in there that comes and like complements their procedure. I think that when you go to a country that doesn't regulate it like we do, you're gambling. You're gambling in the sense that you're looking at a third world country and you're going to try to put your life in their hands. Eh, you know, I get it. There are some places that are claiming to be legitimate. Me personally, I'm cautious when it comes to that stuff.
Let's fast forward a little bit. 50 years from now, what do you think medicine would be able to do that sounds impossible today?
There's going to be a lot of preventative medicine. You're going to hear about gene therapy and gene diagnosis and pre-therapy. You're going to hear about like you're susceptible to this type of condition, or maybe you have connective tissue problems here, and it's going to be categorized based on your gene, and then you're going to go into some type of regenerative medicine or some type of like signaling to strengthen that tissue. It could be easy as you're depleted in that information, so you just need to take this type of like signaling in your body. It could be just a daily use. It could be just based on your injury during your lifespan, but it's going to be architected by the actual DNA that couples with the present and the future type of therapy. So that's where I see things moving.
Hmm. If regenerative medicine becomes powerful enough to extend human life dramatically, do you think humanity is actually prepared for that?
I don't know. Humanity is never prepared, it's never prepared. But I think if you understand that I think when you think about our aging process, when you look at somebody in their 20s and then you tell them to command a team versus someone in their 50s, you have a different mindset. You have that sort of that life experience from the 50-year-old that understands how to deal with people, how to command versus a 20-year-old. But once you hit like 50 years old and you continue on to the 150, it's sort of the same thought process. The same, we understand and we just continue on. So I think that I think when it comes to humanity and the way we think, I feel that the biggest concern would be population. It's going to be something that has to do with some population control, because when you're at that point, when you're not, perishing at that normal age, you're looking at expanding the population, and that's where the big concern will come. And then who's going to actually dictate who stays, who goes, birth control? That might be the possibilities for that process, not so much the aging.
Mm. You've worked at the frontier of medicine and human health for a while now. Has studying regenerative medicine changed the way you personally think about aging in your own life?
Oh yeah, I'm a walking lab. I'm at that point where I know where if I didn't do anything, didn't work out, didn't do my process of how to take care of myself, mind, body, spirit, my meditation, my spiritual, I know exactly where I'll be. I see my peers, I see my friends, and I'm like, oh, there's no way I'm gonna be that kind of person. So I'm the walking lab. So in that sense, I'm sort of like selfish because regenerative medicine is really for me. And then once I figure out how to do it, then I'll spread out the word. So That's how I look at it. I'm the perfect example of if it works or if it don't work. If I
Mm.
feel like that, I'm preaching that, oh, you should be active. If you're injured, use regenerative medicine, this cream regen, and then you'll be fine. And then you see me with a leg brace or some type of elbow brace, and I'm always complaining about my pain. I'm not doing anything. Then you have to start doubting me. So that's why it's important that I'm the kind of lab rat that uses myself as the experiment.
Proof is in the pudding, I guess. And Dr. Dr. Rhee, if someone listening today wants to live a longer and healthier life, what are the three things they should start doing right now?
The biggest thing is you got to understand meditation. Meditation is very important. First thing in the morning, you've got to set your mind straight. You've got to get into a neutral sense. There's nothing worse than starting off in a negative sense. You have a bad dream, a bad day, or you just have some bad information, it's going to set your whole day off. And when that starts happening, you're working with it. You're working with your sympathetic. And now, when you're sympathetically firing off, now you have chronic inflammation. Now you're getting these problems. You've got to start that. So that's what I do. Meditate. Then I got the spiritual side. I believe in God. I make sure that I have my worship and I do my thing in the morning. So I've got the meditation and worship. And lastly, is activity. Start moving. In some capacity, just move. Doesn't matter if it's a walk. It doesn't matter. Even if you don't feel like working out, just go in the gym, walk around 3 times and say, hey, at least I tried something. At least you start a trend and condition yourself to be that person. And that's a big thing, is that if you can get that stress down, you know, get yourself in neutral and get a spiritual sense and get exercise, you're fine.
On a lighter note, you mentioned WWE earlier on. I think we all kind of know what goes on in the ring, but are the injuries real?
Okay, so when you see those guys are crazy. So those guys are completely crazy. I mean, it's very entertaining and it's traumatizing. I mean, these guys are banging away. So let's compare that to sports. Sports, you have a season. You have a season, couple months, and then the season's over, and then they have a lot of time to recover. When you look for those wrestlers that do any type of recovery, it's never a off season. It's continually year round, 2 days a week. They're beating themselves up, and then there's training and working out. But when they're out there performing, they're traumatizing their body and they beat themselves up. So you see these guys when they turn 50, like, holy cow, he's not able to walk. Well, you have to understand what they put their body through for 15 or 10 years of just constantly just from the ropes. Think how high that rope is, like maybe 5 feet, and just land on your back 3 times a day. And then just don't give yourself a chance to rest. And you're sore, but you climb up that rope and do that. Do that for 15 years and see what that's like. And they are abusing their body. So those injuries that like when you see like those slaps and those hits, those present type of things, they know how to protect themselves. But when you look at the stuff you can't see, like the arthritis or some type of maybe a possible stress fracture, they've got those things and they still continue to go. They have to keep moving because they're not really contracted in the sense like a athlete says, all right, no matter what, your money's guaranteed. In their world, it's like a independent contractor and you get paid based on performance. So if you miss a day, you're not getting paid.
You also mentioned the NFL, and in our country we play rugby, and we probably have the greatest rugby team in the world, and it's called the Springboks. And I think I know we've won the World Cup like 4 years in a row, or something silly like that. But I think the US is getting ready to host the two greatest rugby nations, which is South Africa and New Zealand. I think that's happening in October. So that's quite exciting. But if you look at NFL, I mean, these guys are protected with helmets and shoulder pads and maybe a chest guard. I'm sorry, I don't know much about NFL. But then if you look at rugby, these guys are crazy. They have no protection, uh, and they just run into each other. Either getting concussed or. Have you treated any rugby players?
Oh yeah. We have rugby here. We have they're a common type of athlete. Here's something different because of When you look at rugby players, no equipment. They have light equipment. They have like, padded shirts or something like that, but they have light equipment versus football players. They have the helmet, they have the heavy shoulder pads, they've got the big heavy gear. It gives you the false illusion like you're protected. So when you look at rugby players, they don't do a lot of head on head collisions. It's always sliding off and attacking the shoulder, right? Shoulder to shoulder or some kind of like, like body contact. When you come in football world, because you think you have a helmet on, you use that like a weapon. Now you're using it. They teach you as a young kid to lead with your head. So you want to put your helmet in their shoulders or their chest. That's your contact point. So the head's always being contacted. So that's why football players are more susceptible to that CTE and concussion than rugby players. Rugby players, it's not a common sight to see two helmets collide or two heads hitting each other. It's always off the side. It's shoulder to shoulder a little bit, the shoulder to the waist or to the leg. Whereas football players, if you watch them, they lead with their head. They want to knock people out with their heads. But the problem is that little shell, we'll call it a helmet, in your brain inside there, and then it's getting rattled around. Every time you rattle around, the brain swells up a little bit. And when you swell the brain up, well, now you get poor circulation, and then you start walking in the world of, what they call like dementia and all that CTE and all that stuff that you hear about where they go into that tau protein and the amyloid and all that stuff. So it's because of circulation. You just got to understand that sport that you have over there, rugby versus football, are like almost the same in the violence, but it's just different contact points. So that's what's the danger point of that.
Dr. Rhee, thank you very much. It's been an absolute honor to have you on the show, and your wealth of knowledge really. Geez, I wish we had more time, and if we can do another episode soonish, I mean that'll be fantastic. We can share it with the world. Thank you very much for being here and making the time. I'd love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, me too. I loved it, man.
Thank you very much. So this is Voices Unfiltered. I'm Vishen. Please join me on the next conversation. It's going to be just as awesome as this with Dr. Rhee. And Dr. Rhee, we can't wait to get you on the next one.
Yeah, man. Let's do it. I'm excited.